Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Grace. It is a pleasure to be back with you. And it is indeed a pleasure to have you with us this afternoon. We got off to an incredible start this morning. The music was great from the choir Shahé, from NCU, several special musics we had. Pastor Dorian Kelly, his message entitled Look Up and Live. What a powerful voice and what a powerful message that was. And so it was just an awesome morning we have. And now we're going to continue with this afternoon. We have a powerful speaker and presenter this afternoon, but Shireen, my friend Shireen Moss, is going to introduce her, our speaker, for you. And we're going to have, and I'll come back right after the presentation and we'll talk about it. And so I'm glad you're with us. And so right now, I want to introduce my friend Shireen Moss. Hey, Shireen.
Hi, Pastor. How you doing?
Great.
Hello for everyone who's tuning in, listening to our broadcast. As Pastor said, this is Shireen Moss, and I'm at home upstairs, hiding away from everybody. And the privilege is mine to introduce Dr. Gordon as our presenter for this afternoon's program. Now, Dr. Gordon earned her doctoral degree in clinical psychology from Immaculata University and also her master's degree in counseling psychology from Immaculata University. She also earned a bachelor's degrees from Northern Caribbean University, which is formerly the West Indies College. She has held various positions in nursing, in behavioral health, and higher education. After serving as associate professor at DeVry University and Washington Adventist University and adjunct psychology professor at Chestnut Hill College, she returned to clinical work with Crozer Keystone Health System. In her positions as mental health therapist, she worked with children and adolescents, treating a broad spectrum of mental health disorders. Her work with Crozer Keystone Health Systems also involved collaborating with educators to provide optimal mental health support for high-risk students in certain districts of Pennsylvania. At this point, this is where my mother or my grandmother would say something like, you did go too fast, slow down, you did drop over your tongue. So I'm going to slow it down so I can give you a little taste of Jamaica. The way that we would introduce somebody, we would say somebody like Dr. Gordon, she have no feather in her cap. God give her things to do and she do it to the best of her ability. You can see the litany of things what she do long, long, long. Our mother and father must proud her because she accomplished enough and she still have a long way to go. She entered private practice recently and provides mental health services for persons aged 12 years and above, as well as married couples, people preparing for marriage, and all and sundry who would want to use her services. Dr. Gordon is also chair of the Jamaica Diaspora Health Task Force, a group of physicians, nurses, and psychologists, and other healthcare professionals of Jamaican origin or descent dedicated to supporting and improving the healthcare system in Jamaica. Dr. Gordon is a member of several professional organizations, including the American Counseling Association, the American Educational Research Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Association of Christian Counselors, Mercy, National Council for Family Relationships, American Nurses Association. She has presented at various conferences in the United States, Canada, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. She has authored and co-authored articles for professional journalists such as the International Humanities Review and the International Perspectives on Psychology. Dr. Gordon has also authored devotionals for the Women's Devotional published by Pacific Press Publication Association for the years 2012, 2013, 2014, 2019, and 2020. Dr. Gordon stay busy bad. She use up all our time to contribute to the betterment of our society, and the whole of we as Jamaicans proud of her. We live with hat to her, we live with flag to her. And on a personal note, she's a very passionate woman and she has a passion for enriching the lives of families and a deep respect and love for young people. She has a rich background of multicultural exposure in her personal and professional life. And at one time, it was even rumored that she lived in the United States. So also she has a rich Cockney accent, maybe if you catch her unawares, um, she's she has a delight and an enthusiasm for working with people of diverse cultures, um, socioeconomic background, and religious group. Dr. Gordon is also the proud parent, along with her husband, of 40 years of two fine adult sons. She enjoys gardening, playing word games, writing, knitting, taking pictures with her cell phone, and having fun with her family, her friends, and her church family. I want to present to you Dr. Gordon, and I pray that as you listen to everything that she has to say, you will be blessed. Walk good, everybody.
I think that I'm going to take Shireen with me everywhere I go. Thank you, Shireen, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for adding that Jamaican flavor to it. I love it. Because this evening we're going to be talking about Jamaica. So as you know, this month is Black History Month. And today we're going to look at the continued struggle and the victories as well in Jamaica. Just let me share my screen with you and we will go right into our presentation. So as Shireen was telling you before, that I've had some multicultural experiences myself. And the interesting thing is that no matter where I go, I am always Jamaican. People ask me, how is it that I've been in the United States for 42 years and I still haven't. I guess that's because I never really tried to change it. So there it is. But let me tell you a little bit about Jamaica. As you can see from this first slide, that Jamaica is a beautiful island. It's called the Pearl of the Caribbean. And we have beautiful waterfalls, beautiful trees, rich undulating mountains. This is a golf course right here. If you can, I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but it's a golf course overlooking the Caribbean. And when I look at it, it's actually a spot where I've been physically, and I can actually feel the breeze and feel homesick. So I'm going to go on to the next slide before I really get homesick. This evening, we're going to talk about the history of Jamaica. Of course, it would take way too long to talk about all the history of Jamaica, but we're going to do an overview of the history of Jamaica. And then we're going to talk about the culture in Jamaica. And we'll cover things like the cuisine, we'll talk about race and class, we'll talk about religion, we'll talk about migration, and we'll also talk about the spiritual application of the continued struggle. Here is a map of Jamaica. And it just shows, the various what we call parishes. In the United States of America, we have states. In Jamaica, we have parishes. And Jamaica is really a small, relatively small island. It's probably about almost the size of Connecticut. You notice I said almost the size of Connecticut. It's not quite as big as Connecticut. And to travel from one end to the other, nowadays we have big highways. We didn't always have big highways, and it used to be quite a journey to go from, say, Kingston, which is on the eastern end, to the western end, say, Lucy in Hanover. It would probably have taken, I don't know, maybe about 3-4 hours. But now with the highways, you can be there in record time. And so things have really changed and improved over the years as far as our infrastructure is concerned. So we have 14 parishes, and they're divided into 3 counties: Cornwall County, Middlesex County, and Surrey. That's just an overview of the island of Jamaica. Someone has said that Jamaica is like the other West Indian islands, is like a woman with a history. She has had her experiences and has lived her life rapidly. She has enjoyed a fever of prosperity founded upon these incalculable treasures poured into her lap by the buccaneer pirates. She has suffered earthquake, famine, pestilence, fire, and death, and she has been the home of cruel, merciless slavery. Other countries have taken centuries to grow from their primitive life through the flower and fruit of prosperity into the seed time of picturesque decrepitude. Jamaica has lived through it all in a few years. And this is from Howard Pyle, one of our journalists, writers in Jamaica. So the last time I went to Jamaica, I remember that there was an earthquake. We were actually doing some work in the community in Montego Bay, in that area, and we were up in the hills, and we got the news that there was going to be an earthquake. And, we were concerned, and we felt the earthquake, and it was a big one. It was a really big one. Later on, I'm going to tell you about another earthquake that took place, but this one was even bigger. And we were told that a tsunami would be following it. Well, we were alarmed, we were concerned, but we continued our journey down the hill into the town of Montego Bay with a plan of driving along the coastline. Remember, I said there was going to be a tsunami, to drive along the coastline to go back to Kingston. We continued to drive, and then persons in the bus started to talk about, well, should we stop to get something to eat? And there was a big, long discussion, and some people saying, yes, let's stop. Where should we stop? And all that kind of thing. This big discussion about food. Mind you, there was a tsunami coming, right? And so then we decided to stop. And we stopped. At least I should say they decided to stop. I had voted against it, but they decided to stop. So I'm in the bus. I can't go anywhere. We all have to go to the same place. So we stopped at a place to get some fish. And I mean, fish is something that is a very special dish to us in Jamaica. Fried fish, an escovitch fish. And we stopped by this restaurant that was by the seaside. I mean, right by the seaside. It was partly open, and I could walk from my table to the sea. And actually, I took my shoes off and stepped into the water, but there was a tsunami coming. I just want to tell you that this is kind of indicative of the Jamaican spirit and mood. We have a tendency to kind of not get too excited or worried about things. And most people had the feeling that, oh, the tsunami is not coming. They're always saying the tsunami is coming. I'm always as a trouble come. Well, it didn't come. And we were very relieved that, at least I was very relieved that it didn't come, because, I've lived away from Jamaica for a long, long time. And I guess I've lost some of that, everything's going to be all right kind of feeling. And so I was a little concerned, but the tsunami did not come. That was one of my experiences that just spoke so loudly of our spirit and our nature. We don't get very worried about things, and we're not very scared of most things. But it could have been different, but it wasn't. Okay, let's go on. I'm going to ask, we're going to see a video right now, a little bit about the history of Jamaica. Carlton?
Please don't embarrass me. Fix up yourself. Come, fix up your shirt.
Jamaican religion comes in all sizes. There's something to fit nearly everyone. If you can't find your own size, it seems you can just go out and start a church to suit your needs. The country is mostly Christian, with an impressively wide variety of churches. In Black River, a small town with a population of about 5,000, there are 13 churches. Throughout Jamaica, you will also find Rastafarians and a smaller number of Jews, Hindus, and Muslims. There are also African-based cult worship, although quite often adherents belong to a Christian denomination as well. This video on religion will provide a look at the spread of Christianity, which forms so integral a part of Jamaican culture. Jamaica's first encounter with Christianity came in the form of Roman Catholicism, introduced by Spanish settlers who arrived in the island in 1504. When the British captured Jamaica in 1655, the Church of England, later called the Anglican Church, became the state church. Initially, other denominations were tolerated, but as the slavery and the plantation system progressed, only the Church of England, which was a church of the planter class, was allowed to function freely. Despite efforts of the church hierarchy in England to have local church instruct slaves in Christianity, the Church of England in Jamaica almost totally rejected slaves throughout the 18th century. In 1754, the Moravians landed in Black River as the first missionaries and devoted themselves to the conversion of Jamaica's non-white population. They were followed by other groups: Baptists in 1783, Methodists in 1789, and Presbyterians in the early 19th century. Because these nonconformist denominations preached a message of equality for all men, they met with extreme and at times violent opposition from the slave-owning class and the state church. The fears of the plantocracy were well-founded, as the message of the missionaries, who were both black and white, became a catalyst for the eventual abolition of slavery in 1834 and emancipation in 1838. The Church of England attempted reforms when emancipation was imminent, but for the most part it was rejected by the slaves that it had previously alienated. After emancipation, it was primarily the missionary churches that helped to resettle and educate the newly freed slaves. In 1860 to 1861, a period of intense religious activity occurred in Jamaica. It was called the Great Revival. It started in the nonconformist churches, using vibrant evangelism to spread Christianity throughout the country. In this time of religious fervor, African elements and rituals which were still entrenched in the lives of ex-slaves intermingled with Christian beliefs, and the outcome was a genuinely Jamaican religion called revival. It features spirit possession and music as a central feature of the worship experience. The two branches of revival are known as Revival Zion and Pocomania.
Everybody, church, just lift your hands and just praise the Lord, everybody. Just everybody. Oh.
And these Tainos or Arawaks came from South America, and they gave the name to the island Xaymaca, Xaymaca, which means land of wood and water. The Arawaks were a mild and simple people by nature. They were physically they were light brown in color, short and well shaped with coarse black hair. Their faces were broad and noses generally flat. They grew cassava, sweet potatoes, corn, fruits, vegetables, cotton, and tobacco. Tobacco was grown on a large scale as smoking was their most popular pastime. That tells you a little bit about the Arawaks, who were the original inhabitants of Jamaica. When Christopher Columbus actually stumbled on Jamaica, he wasn't looking for Jamaica, but he actually stumbled on the island. He was happy to find it. He was surprised. It was a beautiful place, but he was not really originally looking for, not originally looking for the island. I just realized that I'm not in, okay, there we are. Okay, just a little technical difficulty right there. So after the first colonists, if you like, were from Spain. So from 1494 to 1655, the island of Jamaica was actually Spanish. It was ruled by the Spanish, and the problem with the period of time, the Spanish colony, Jamaica as a Spanish colony, was that the Spaniards actually treated the Taínos or Arawak Indians very badly. And after a while, they pretty much died. They died out. I've been told that there were some who survived, but that's a question. That's a question mark. We're not quite sure about that. If any of the Taínos in Jamaica actually survived that time. They also were not accustomed to the diseases that the Spaniards brought, because they had lived a pretty natural life, where out in the, eating natural foods and living pretty natural life. And so it was difficult for them to survive during that time. Okay, so after the Spaniards occupied the island for a while, then came the British. And the British attacked Jamaica in 1655, and that actually overcame the Spaniards and took over the country. And so some of the Spaniards left and went to Cuba. Some of the Spaniards remained on the island, but moved out into the outer parts of the island. And some of the individuals that the Spaniards had kept as slaves, which were the Taínos, some of them also moved out into the outer regions of the island. The British brought with them several things. First of all, they brought plantation life. They were very much involved with the slave trade. So they brought slaves, African slaves, to Jamaica, crossing the Atlantic. And at that time, most slaves who came from Africa, who were brought from Africa, were either dropped off in the United States or one of the islands, in this case, Jamaica. Virginia and Jamaica, the state of Virginia in the United States and Jamaica, were actually the main dropping points for slaves who were brought from Africa. Most of the slaves who were brought from Western Africa. And they worked the sugarcane fields, and you can see pictures of sugarcane here if you're not familiar with it. But the slaves did all the work in the cane fields, and they were obviously unpaid labor. They were treated badly. Anything that you know about slavery in the United States, you can just apply the same thing to slavery in Jamaica. One of the differences, though, is that the slaves who were brought from Africa to Jamaica, Jamaica provided a kind of climate, and the vegetation and everything was more similar to what they were used to in Africa. And also, because Jamaica was colonized, the number of Europeans, the slave masters or the slave owners who were in Jamaica, they were outnumbered eventually by the number of slaves. And this was to the slaves' advantage. Many slaves ran away. There were many uprisings. There were many rebellions. The people who were brought to Jamaica as slaves from Africa came from places like Nigeria and Ghana, mostly Ghana and Nigeria. Although there was one notable slave who came from Guinea, but that was also part of West Africa anyway. But these individuals tended to be very, very fierce, if you like. And they really did a lot of rebellion. the slave trade, the English settlers concerned themselves with growing crops that could easily be sold in England. Tobacco, indigo, and cocoa soon gave way to sugar, which became the main crop for the island. The sugar industry grew so rapidly that the 57 sugar estates in the island in 1673 grew to nearly 430 by 1739. The slave trade became a popular and profitable venture for the colonists. But the slaves were not happy with their status, so they rebelled whenever they could. Many of them were successful in running away from the plantations and joining the Maroons in the almost inaccessible mountains. So Jamaica has different types of terrain. In some areas, it's very mountainous. And there were individuals who were African slaves who eventually they were called Maroons. And they were called Maroons. It's from a Spanish word, cimarron, which means that they were unruly and wild. Well, in actual fact, they were individuals who valued their freedom, and there were many uprisings among the Maroons who lived up in the mountains where the Europeans were not. It was not so easy for them to travel into those mountainous areas. Today we call that area the cockpit country, and the Maroons have many descendants who are still alive in Jamaica and in the diaspora. And the Maroons are very proud people. One of their leaders, she was known as Queen Nanny of the Maroons. She was a fierce warrior, and she led her people in many rebellions against slavery. So because of all the uprisings and what have you, the Spanish colony passed away. The British colony eventually also passed away. But during the British colonial times, there were some people who were called pirates or buccaneers. And so these pirates, a lot of them would hang out in a place called Port Royal. Port Royal is Kingston is the capital of Jamaica now. And Port Royal is kind of on that eastern side of Kingston. That city, Port Royal, became known as the wickedest city in the world. It had that reputation. On June 7, 1692, I told you I would tell you about another earthquake. On June 7, 1692, at 11:43 a.m., there was a 7.5 magnitude earthquake, followed by a tsunami, and it destroyed most of the city of Port Royal. Those of us who were recently in Jamaica and experienced the earthquake, which was actually 7.8, which was supposed to be followed by a tsunami, but it didn't happen. There was a lot of talk afterwards about how God had delivered us, because on June 7, 1692, there was an earthquake of 7.5 magnitude, and it completely destroyed the city of Port Royal. We had 7.8, and some people on the island did not even feel the earthquake. Why it happened at that time differently, I don't know. In any case, today, Port Royal is a thriving city that is positioned to become a world-class heritage, environmental, and cultural attraction. And you see some, I hope you're seeing some pictures here of Port Royal, and you can see some cannon guns, and also you will see a building that's leaning over to the side. That is as a result of that earthquake that took place in 1692. I've actually been into that building, and it's just the weirdest feeling. You feel as if you're falling over on your side, you know. But Port Royal is being really rebuilt, and it's now a tourist attraction and also a thriving city for the individuals living there. So I talked before about some of the slave rebellions. And one of the slave rebellions, I'm going to tell you about just two of them. One took place at Easter time in 1760. It was led by Taki. Taki was a Coromantee chief from Guinea, West Africa. And in that rebellion, a lot of slave owners and other Europeans were actually killed in that rebellion. And then there was another big one in 1831, led by Sam Sharp, who is another of our national heroes. This rebellion also kind of it happened not too long before slavery was eventually abolished in Jamaica. And so we talk about emancipation. Emancipation came about basically because of some of these slave rebellions, and secondly, because of the work of humanitarians who concerned themselves about slavery. Just like in the United States of America, you had the Underground Railroad, and many Quakers were instrumental in helping people to escape and go to Canada and other places. In Jamaica, the Quakers were also actively protesting against slavery and helping the slaves to actually escape. A man by the name of William Wilberforce was he was English, and he was very instrumental in bringing about emancipation. Now, the interesting thing is that emancipation was declared on August 1, 1834, but and at that time, Spanish Town was the capital of Jamaica. The interesting thing is that although it was declared on August 1, 1834, emancipation really did not come fully into place until 1838. In the intervening 4 years, the apprenticeship system was in place. And what this apprenticeship system was, it was a mandatory 6-year unpaid service for any slave over the age of 6. So before emancipation, children, everybody worked in the cane fields. But when emancipation came, instead of just freeing the people, what they did was to establish another system called the apprenticeship system. So the former slaves would now work for their former owners without pay. No pay. So long as a person was 6 years old or older, they had to do this 6-year mandatory service. And their conditions really, even though according to the law, they were supposed to be free, but they really weren't free. And they were still beholden to the plantation owner, who provided food and clothing and when I say housing, we're not talking about, any nice homes. We're talking about essentially same thing that you're used to seeing about slavery in the United States of America. The type of shacks that they lived in, and they were subject to bad treatment, the same kind of bad treatment as the slavery that took place here in the United States of America. So emancipation came because of the slave rebellions, because of some political changes in England, and because of the philanthropic and evangelical work of the Quakers and men like William Wilberforce. So even after, in 1838, when the former slaves actually got real liberation, they were actually emancipated. A number of them moved off into the country areas, the more undeveloped areas, and developed villages, in the country areas of Jamaica. But they still had barriers to success. There was arbitrary taxation. They had difficulty owning land because they didn't have any money, obviously so. And then they had to rent from the same landowners, and the rentals were high, and there was anti-squatting legislation, and even those who got work got really low wages, so they had a difficult time, and there was much poverty and struggling for the slaves even after emancipation. And as the Jamaica Information Service informs us, for the whites of Jamaica and elsewhere, slavery had been abolished. The challenge of emancipation consisted in organizing production around free labor while keeping alive the spirit of inequality that had marked the plantation system. So really, slavery was abolished, the Emancipation Day finally came, but the way the system operated had the slaves still less than in the thinking of the plantation owners, and not only less than in their thinking, but also in the way they were treated and in their lack of opportunities for growth. However, after many years of struggle and many other things happening, on August 6th, 1962, Jamaica was granted its independence from England. Jamaica now has its own constitution, which sets out the laws by which the people are governed. The Constitution provides for the freedom, equality, and justice for all who dwell in the country. August 6, 1962 was a really, I mean, it was a time of jubilation. It was an exciting time in Jamaica. I remember as a little girl, the whole excitement of Independence Day. Independence had come to Jamaica. You know what's really interesting though? We're an independent country. We have our own constitution. We have our own flag. We have our own currency and all kinds of things. We've gone miles beyond where we were. But I believe we're still a part of the British Commonwealth. Yes, but we're self-governing. And you'll find that a lot of our practices, even the way we write, the way we spell some English words, for example, the word labor. If you read something that's written in Jamaica, you're going to see L-A-B-O-U-R, whereas in America, you know, it's L-A-B-O-R. So the official English that's used in Jamaica tends to reflect our history of British colonization. So we have our own constitution. It is the most fundamental legal document in the country. It guarantees the freedom, rights, and privileges of every Jamaican citizen. The Constitution reflects the country's independence as a nation state, and to this day remains the cornerstone of the island's legal systems and institutions. We have our flag, which is that green, yellow, and black that you see there. Our motto, our coat of arms, it reads, "Out of many, one people." And you'll see there's an alligator on the top, and you'll see two on the sides. They're supposed to be two Arawak Indians that represent the original inhabitants of Jamaica. So Jamaica is a multicultural population, as is indicated by our coat of arms. You'll find that we have persons from Irish Celtic background, and these are typically descendants of indentured servitude that has prevailed through the West Indies. So after slaves received emancipation, and when slavery was abolished, the plantation owners, they needed free labor, or at least cheap labor. And so what happened next was that they brought in persons from India and China and other Asian countries as indentured servants. So these indentured servants, they were paid, but very little, and they were treated badly as well when we look at the history of these indentured servants. And then we also have persons who are expatriates from the United Kingdom, from England, Ireland, Scotland. Scattered around the island, we also still have some Spaniards, Germans, Scottish, and even a Jewish population. In Jamaica, we also have white expatriates from Canada, US, and other countries. So we on the surface, we look as if we're a very united country, and we are racially, in the sense that nobody talks about, unless you're talking in academic language, nobody talks about an Irish Jamaican or a Black Jamaican or an Indian Jamaican or a Chinese Jamaican. Everybody's just a Jamaican, and so racism, as we know, is born out of the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. It breeds prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism that is unleashed against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular racial or ethnic group, not just in minority setting like the Black people in America, but also societies with Black majority, such as in colonized and post-enslaved territories, such as Jamaica. Interestingly, if you speak to most Jamaicans, they will tell you that we don't have racism in Jamaica. However, there has been some leftovers, if you like, from those colonial days, from slavery and from colonial days. So we don't discriminate against people because of their ethnicity, but there is something about shades of color that still remain a kind of a Jamaican thing. And we don't like to admit it, but it's still there in some ways. And interestingly enough, although more than 90% of the population of Jamaica our forefathers at least, originated from Africa, for a long time, there was a negative perception of Africa. Nobody wanted to be called an African. And the situation was that if the lighter complexion you were, the more highly you were regarded by people. Thank God that is not so much anymore. I can't say it's gone completely because it probably isn't, but there isn't such a color distinction as there used to be, although we still see vestiges of it in the fact that there are large numbers of individuals who will actually bleach their skin in order to be lighter complexion. This is how our minds have been programmed by slavery and by the colonial days that followed slavery, so that to some extent, we still kind of tend to pride ourselves and make distinctions based on color, but it's not an official sense. And everybody, there's no segregation. There's no legal system that enforces this difference. It is more a kind of a psychological after effect of what we experience. So we are predominantly Negro community, although truth be told, most Jamaicans are mixed with in some way. So we're really what you would call a multicultural society. Although before I left Jamaica, I had never actually considered the concept. Well, I mean, I was a child, but still, I'd never thought of myself as to whether I was Black, white, or whatever. I was just a little girl, happy and carefree, until I moved to England when I was 10 years old and discovered that I was Black. Because nobody had really pointed that out to me before, and it was not a part of my reality until I moved to England when I was 10 years old with my family. And in school, suddenly people were calling me names that had different meanings for me. I'll never forget the little girl, her name was Virginia, who sat behind me in class every day and pulled my hair and called me a Black bastard. Now in Jamaica, if you say somebody's a bastard, that means that their mother and father were not married when you were born. That's the exact definition. And so I was quite offended. I wasn't offended because she called me Black, because I wasn't quite sure what that meant anyway. But bastard, I was not a bastard. I was quite upset. But you know, as I'm living in England for 9 years, I eventually gradually understood that there was something different about me because I was Black. I found out that being Black was in England was not something that was considered to be good. And I lived in England during the times of Enoch Powell, if anyone's familiar with that. Enoch Powell from the North, you know, who made very hot speeches about all these immigrants who were coming into the country. And they called us horrible names. And it was during the time of the skinheads who would go around and attack Black people. And so I learned during that time what it meant to be Black, but I still didn't have that full understanding of being Black. Even though I heard about people like Angela Davis, and I tried to emulate Angela Davis, you know, by growing this big afro, and but I didn't know about it. I didn't know what it meant, the real meaning of being Black, until I came to live in the United States. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. So the education system in Jamaica is still led by a kind of a colonial philosophy, and it tends to lean towards the Anglo-Saxon way of thinking. In Jamaica, the official language is English, and the elite tend to speak standard English with a Jamaican accent. But large numbers of Jamaicans, in fact, all Jamaicans, really, to be honest, all Jamaicans speak Patois, which is our own. But if you grew up in the time that I grew up, we knew that it wasn't okay for nice girls to talk patois. So, you know, we were kind of raised to think that it was better to speak the Queen's English. It was in the 70s when I returned from England. 1973, I returned from England, and that was such an exciting time for me because I realized I came at a time when there was an awakening of our national pride and national identity. And being, you know, I was 19 years old, and so I was ready to kind of become involved in this new spirit, understanding that, and it kind of fitted with my own personality, because I never did think that anybody was better than anybody else. And so now all of a sudden it was okay to speak patois. It was all right. It was ours, and we were proud of it. We were proud of who we were. We were even proud of our hair. We were proud of our hair, and we were proud of being Black and being called Black. And I loved it. And we were proud of being Jamaicans. And one of the things that helped to awaken this national pride and national awareness was the music industry. One of our national heroes, Bob Marley, who made reggae a national part of our national music. You know, prior to that, nice people only kind of listened to English type of music or British type of music. But now reggae was ours, and we were proud of it. And so these musicians who actually helped to shape that new national pride, that's where I believe the biggest change came in Jamaica and in the way we think. So we are now proud, actually, of being Black. We've always been Black, but now we're proud of it. In Jamaica, one of Bob Marley's songs, he talks about release yourself from mental slavery. And so the question is often asked, have we really been liberated in our thinking, or are we still in mental slavery? It seems like Zora Neale Hurston made this comment, and this was earlier on though, before the 70s, when she said, in Jamaica, it is the aim of everybody to talk English, act English, and look English. And that last specification is where the greatest difficulty arises, because of course you can talk English all you want, and you can act English all you want, but you look Jamaican. So she says, you know, it is not so difficult to put a coat of European culture over African culture, but it is next to impossible to lay a European face over an African face in the same generation. So here is Jamaica with all our various ethnicities represented: African, Afro-European, European, Chinese, Afro-Chinese, East Indian, Afro-East Indian, and then others, of a large number of us actually, who are mixed here, there, and you know, everywhere. And all of these individuals are Jamaicans. They're all Jamaicans. They're not hyphenated Jamaicans. They're Jamaicans. As our coat of arms says, out of many, one people. We've come a long way from the days of slavery. And we are fortunate in having struggled and come to this place where we know ourselves and we're proud of ourselves. But we ought not to forget where we came from, how it all started. When we forget how it all started and where we've been and what our forefathers lived through, sometimes it causes us to lose that sense of identity that gives us strength. In Jamaica right now, I would say that, and the literature bears out, that racism is not a major factor. But what is a major factor still is classism. And it carries over even into the diaspora. So there's a rough correlation of class with race that persists in Jamaica. And the way it works is that the sociologists have divided up the classes into four that exist in Jamaica. The upper class, which actually are mostly foreign residents and corporations. And then the white collar middle class, which is predominantly Black, the skilled and semi-skilled working class, which is also predominantly Black or African, or of African origin, and the unskilled lower class. So the reason why we say that there's a rough correlation of class with race that persists in Jamaica is because the persons who tend to be in the upper class tend to be of European or mixed origin. And the persons who are in the white collar middle class, skilled and semi-skilled and unskilled lower class tend to be predominantly of African origin. So there's that loose kind of correlation, not that anybody's walking around thinking I'm Black or I'm Indian or I'm Chinese or even paying attention to that in the way we interact with each other. But in the actual fact of the matter, that's what's been happening. Although it's changing. It is changing so much. If we even look at our government, the makeup of our government right now, we will see the change. Because say in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, people who were in government were mostly either British or of mixed race, what we called mulatto. But now, when you look at the persons who are in government, it is predominantly persons of African origin. Religion is a powerful uniting factor in Jamaica. I cannot think of another society, says George Graham, who is a Jamaican journalist and author. He says, I cannot think of another society in which the Bible is so influential. Foreigners might think of Jamaica as some kind of hedonistic lotus land where Rastas in dreadlocks constantly play reggae music, dance suggestively, and smoke ganja, marijuana. But to me, this is a false image, probably created to lure tourists and sell records. No, in Jamaica, actually, religion, and specifically, even though we have many religions represented, but Christianity has a very significant, is a powerful force in Jamaica. Religion has a powerful part to play in our Jamaican culture.
Building, just lift your hand and just wave it to the King of Glory. Just wave your hands to the Lord. Amen. Praise God, praise God, praise God. Listen, the anthem of our heart this morning is not the Jamaica anthem, though you might see us in our black, green, and gold. Is that someday I'm going to go where Jesus is. Let me see the hands of all those that are going where Jesus is someday.
In 1872, the Church of England was disestablished as the state church. It redeemed itself somewhat by being responsible for the establishment of some of Jamaica's best schools, and now embraces individuals from all levels of society. Newer denominations such as Salvation Army, African Methodists, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Mormons, and Baha'i came in the late 19th and early 20th century. The largest single denomination in Jamaica today, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, came to Jamaica in 1894. It has made a name for itself in education with the establishment of the Northern Caribbean University in Mandeville. The Pentecostal movement started in Jamaica from about 1918. It blossomed in the 1940s when missionaries from America came to the island during an upsurge in American revivalism. Pentecostalism appealed to the poor who had been alienated by the established churches. It was also attractive to revivalists who identified with their vigorous style of worship. It is not a single denomination. It encompasses many fundamentalist groups that interpret all of the Bible as literal truth and emphasize the experience of the Holy Spirit. Throughout the late 20th century and into the 21st century, many more churches and denominations have been established. They are often movements that break away from previously established churches. Many start out as crusades and on their tent. The tent may stay up for months to be replaced by a simple building, usually made of plywood. Then in a few years, a more substantial structure may be built. The style of worship in Jamaican religion varies from very reserved to non-stop action. Despite male-dominated leadership in most churches, congregations are predominantly female. Although the Seventh-day Adventists, who worship on a Saturday, are the largest denomination, they are far outnumbered by Sunday worshippers, most of whom belong to Pentecostal movement. The non-fundamentalists such as Anglicans, Roman Catholics, Moravians, Baptists, Methodists, and the United Church still maintain a strong presence, although they are generally on the decline. Jamaican religion today, as far as Christianity goes, is a true lesson in diversity. It has played a pivotal role in Jamaica's history and continues to influence our society today.
So as you can see, religious affiliation in Jamaica is really strong. And interestingly enough, folks, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has the largest percentage of Christians in Jamaica. When you combine all the other religions, all the other Christian denominations, when you combine all the other Christian denominations, they outnumber the Seventh-day Adventists. But when you take them individually, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has the highest percentage. The question now is this: with all these religious bodies in Jamaica, we have the potential and the opportunity to make such a difference. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but I can't possibly end the section on culture in Jamaica without talking about Jamaican food. So I'm going to take a little pause here to just let you think about Jamaican food. That most people, when they think about Jamaica, they think about the foods that they've either had when they went for a visit, or food that they've had from friends of theirs who are Jamaicans. And I just want to share a little recipe with you, so that after we finish talking about Jamaica today, if you kind of want to identify a little bit, maybe you can go cook some rice and peas.
Hey Grace, I'm gonna make Jamaica rice and peas, okay? This is my peas. I'm gonna put it in my instant pot here because I didn't put it to soak overnight. So it's gonna take about 15 minutes to cook in my instant pot. See, I have my dry coconut. That's the real thing. But if you don't feel like to blend up no coconut or grate it, you could use the coconut powder. It works just as good. Now I have my rice. This is like about 4 cups of rice. And I have my herbs here, guys. I love to blend up my herbs. I have ginger in it. I have garlic. I have scallion. I have onions. I have pimento seed. I have a lot more stuff in it. And I have some coconut oil here to put in the rice. That's they don't stick in the pot bottom. And I have some all-purpose seasoning here. And over here I have my pimento leaf straight from Jamaica and my scotch bonnet pepper. Make the rice and peas really good. Guys, I'm gonna put my peas in the instant pot now, okay? And I'm gonna put in my herbs in it, okay? My peas is finished now, so I'm gonna put it on the stove top, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna put my coconut milk in it now. Okay, guys, I'm gonna stir it up a little bit, and I'm gonna cover it and make it boiled up, and then I'm gonna put the rice in it soon. Okay, this is some jasmine rice, guys, but you can use brown rice also, because you know the brown rice is much healthier for you, but I prefer use the white rice because my kids love white rice. Okay, I'm gonna put it in the peas now, okay? And I'm gonna make this cook maybe about 30 minutes. And I will show you the final touch. Okay guys, after 30 minutes, that's my rice and peas. And that's the final touch, guys. I have some pop chai and some fried plantain. Yummy. And that's Jamaica rice and peas.
I hope you enjoyed that, and make sure that you try it, okay? Because it tastes real good. And if it doesn't turn out right, go visit one of your Jamaican friends and they'll do it for you. All right, so as we were saying before, the religious affiliation in Jamaica is very strong. There's hardly a person that you might meet in Jamaica who's not affiliated with some religion or other. People tend to think a lot about Rastafarians when they think about Jamaica. And that is in fact one of the religions. As you can see from the chart, they represent 1.1% of the society. So the affiliation is not that strong. And yet the stereotype tends to be that people think of, Jamaica, and they think of Rastafarians, which is, I mean, it's okay. We have one of our heroes, Bob Marley, and several others who we all love. But I just want to point out this evening that the largest number of Christians in Jamaica are Seventh-day Adventists. As a matter of fact, our Prime Minister is Seventh-day Adventist, and a number of other members of the government at the moment are Seventh-day Adventists. And so we have strong influence in the island. My concern when I think about the influence that we have is what message are we, how effective are we in influencing the values and norms of our society? Jesus says that we are the salt of the earth. His followers are the salt of the earth. I'm not saying that only Seventh-day Adventists are followers of Christ, but I am saying, because I'm talking to us right now, and I'm saying we're supposed to be the salt of the earth. We are the city set upon a hill that cannot be hid. We are representatives of Christ. And I wonder to what extent is the church influencing the values and norms of the society. You will find, I mentioned to you earlier on when we were talking about the history of Jamaica, that Port Royal was referred to as the wickedest city in the world. Right now also, just last week, I was checking on statistics, and I was told that Jamaica is currently regarded as the murder capital of the world. I don't like to say negative things about my country. And I'm not saying it because I'm part of the diaspora. In other words, I live outside of Jamaica. We have about 4 million people, 2 million, sorry. We have about 2 million people living in Jamaica, Jamaicans. And about 4 million people living in Jamaica. And the diaspora is comprised of about 2 million. So half of the number of people who live in Jamaica, we have half that number of Jamaicans living outside of Jamaica, and we are considered to be the diaspora. But I tell you something about Jamaicans. It doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter how long we've been where we are. We still tend to consider ourselves Jamaican. And so I believe that we ought to care about what's happening in our country. Even though we might have adopted another country, we might be citizens of another country. But the place where we were born should still matter to us, I believe. And so I wonder, the 2 million in the diaspora now live mostly in the United States of America, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Of course, there are also Jamaicans living just about any country you can think of in the world. I just spoke to someone who is in Geneva, Switzerland, and I know of someone who is in Australia. So we're everywhere, but we should still care about this. And as Christian Jamaicans, you see, here's the thing. We are proud of our heritage. We are proud of our ethnicity. We are accustomed to being the majority. So we have been blessed to not have a mindset that prevents us from being able to think of possibilities. We have a natural entrepreneurial spirit. But it's all well and good to have all of that. But what are we doing with it? How are we using it to better ourselves and those around us? Are we using it just to say, oh, I'm so proud of what I am and what I have, and think that we're better than anybody? We're not better than anybody else. We've been blessed in some ways, but we're not better than anybody else. And I want you to remember from where we came, because one of the things that I noticed when I came to the United States of America, it was a difficult transition. Anybody who migrates has to go through a process of acculturation. And there are 4 ways in which you can acculturate. You can either separate, so that what you do is you hold on to your original culture and don't participate in anything that is of the other culture. And so you're kind of living as a stranger in the society that you're living in, and you live your own culture. You might, in some instances, people don't even bother to learn the language of the place that they are. They're separated. Or you can become marginalized. So in other words, you take on the belief that you are a minority and you're inferior, and therefore you believe that there are things that you can't do and places that you can't go and ways that you can't be. You're marginalized. You're not a part of the larger society because you think that you have been allocated where you can be, what you can do, and where you can go. Or you can become integrated to the point that before I go to integration, you can assimilate. If you assimilate, it means that you become a part of the new culture and you totally abandon your original culture. Now, there are several problems with that, and I don't have time to discuss all of it, but there are several problems with that. So you have given up your original identity. You don't care if everybody's killing everybody or if the healthcare system isn't up to snuff or anything else, because you have given up that culture. Or you can integrate, which means that you maintain your original culture that's already internalized, actually, and then at the same time you can learn the new culture and you can live both cultures side by side in an amicable way. That's actually a healthy way to go, to acculturate, to integrate. I am suggesting that the racial divide that exists in our new country, which is ours now, I am suggesting that we should use the strength of the experiences that we have had and the experiences of our forefathers to forge new ways of integrating with the culture in which we live, so that we might be a light on a hill that cannot be hid, so that we might be the salt that flavors the society in which we live. So rather than yielding to the negative influences and the negative possibilities, I am suggesting that we remember our roots. We remember from where we came. We remember the struggle that our forefathers went through and where we are now and what we have achieved, so that we can be a light here in our new culture and also back home in our original culture. But the most powerful thing is that when we become Christians, any cultural affinities that we have to a country or a group of people, it takes a back seat to our Christian culture. And so whatever we do and wherever we go and however we are among people, we need to recognize that our basic or dominant culture needs to be the Christian culture. And so I'm hoping that we can see in the struggles of Black people here in the United States of America and in the struggles of people in Jamaica and other West Indian islands and other places across the world, we can see in that struggle where we came from hard times, difficult ways of being, and we have emerged somewhat victorious. And that we can use that to parallel our Christian experience, so that even though we struggle now with many things, we struggle with sinfulness, we struggle with societal conditions, we struggle with all kinds of things. But ultimately, as we know that we have been promised by the one that we follow, God himself, we know that we will be victorious in the long run. And I'm hoping that we can be encouraged by the struggles that we have here and the victories that we win, to know that one day, not so far away, I hope, one day we can say, just over the mountain is the promised land. And there lies the holy city that's built by God's own hand, where there will be no Black people, white people, there'll be no Jamaicans and Americans, there'll be no Black section and white section, there'll be no segregation, but we will just be all one people under God, who is our creator, who made of all people one blood, here to live on this earth. Thank you so much for spending the time with me. I hope that you learned something, or that something raise some kind of thoughts in your mind that might be beneficial to your Christian journey and your Christian struggle here today. Thank you.
Dr. Gordon, that was incredible.
This is the land of my birth. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is Jamaica, my Jamaica, the land of my birth. I will never leave her shores. I will never run away. I will always believe in the black, the green, the gold, I say. Our nation great above the trials. We must face the test of time. Cause our people, they are strong and we are going to get along. Though some people say we are poor, but the progress you make, my friend, is not always a rich you are. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is Jamaica, my Jamaica, the land of my birth. Let us stop for a minute, count our blessings one by one. We should never be disloyal, but stand up and keep strong. My Jamaica is a beautiful island. She is the pearl of the Caribbean Sea. And our people, they are free, no oppression here to see. With the prettiest woman there be. On the hills and the plains and the rivers and the valleys always beckon to me. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is Jamaica, my Jamaica, the land of my birth. Miss Tourist, Mr. Tourist, leave your land and come. Tarry here for a while and have a bed in the warm, warm sun. We will share a lot with you. Our people, they are true. They will want to be with you. They will love, they will help, they will give. If you wish, my friend, you can live. You will be a happier one in the land of the rising sun. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is Jamaica, my Jamaica, the land of my birth. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is the land of my birth. I said this is Jamaica, my Jamaica.
Muted. Muted.
All right. All right, Dr. Gordon, that was incredible. Now look, we have a Q&A session that's coming, and but I want to start. I got a couple of questions for you, if I might begin, okay?
Okay.
I believe I heard you say that you've been here for 40 plus years.
Yes.
Okay, here's my first question. Are you, and if you could turn your volume up, or maybe it's my volume. Maybe it's my volume. I don't know. All right, my first question. Since you've been here so long away from your native country, are you a Jamaican or a Jafacan? I mean, just, you know, inquiring minds want to know, Dr. Gordon, you've been away from the homeland so long. Inquiring minds want to know.
Okay, so I have two things to say. One, I really want to know what a Jamaican is. And the second thing is, I am absolutely a Jamaican.
Well, look, I just heard the term this morning, about a Jamaican. And so I'm going to take a stab at it.
Okay.
From what I gathered, Jamaican is a person of Jamaican heritage who was born here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Parents and relatives may have been born on the island, but they were born here, but they try to identify with, with everything.
Yeah.
So
okay, so that's with that definition, I am most definitely a Jamaican. I was born in Jamaica.
right. Okay, awesome. I want to see if you agree with this. This is my personal assessment, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I have arrived at the conclusion that Jamaicans are the proudest human beings on planet Earth, barring none. I don't know who's in second place, but they're in a distant second place. Would you agree with that? Because you spoke about coming back home from England, and then there was this rush of Jamaican pride. It had to do with the music and Bob Marley and the whole nine yards. We had a similar experience here in the U.S., right? Are all Jamaicans as proud? And look, it is a positive thing. It is a great thing. I love the Jamaican pride. Is that assessment that you agree with or no?
Okay, so nothing is ever all, right?
Okay.
So I have to say I don't suppose it's all. There has to be somebody who's not proud of their heritage, and I know that there are people who are not proud of their heritage, and those would be the ones. Remember, I talked about acculturation.
Sure.
And the different ways in which we acculturate, right? So the person who's not so proud of their heritage, although there are other reasons why people might separate or assimilate. The difficulty with assimilating for most of us as Jamaicans, one of the difficulties is, of course, we're Black. And so the majority society here is the white society. So we can assimilate in terms of the way we talk, in terms of the way we behave, but we'll never be able to assimilate physically because we stand out. If I'm walking down the road and a white supremacist comes up to me and wants to punch me in the face because I'm Black, he's not going to stop to ask me, where were you born?
Absolutely.
What he will see is a Black woman.
Absolutely.
Right? So I don't try to separate myself in that way at all. Now, about the pride. I believe that most Jamaicans are extremely proud of their culture. I want to temper it though with the idea that it's not a pride that says I am better than you.
Okay.
It's a pride that comes from how we've been, what we internalized about ourselves as we grew up. Just think about it. We all, African Americans, Jamaicans, and other persons from other countries, we were brought as slaves from Africa. Now, most of the individuals who were brought as slaves to Jamaica came from West Africa, countries like Ghana and Nigeria and Guinea, and those countries, right? And so we all have a common start, if you like. We all originate from the same place.
Right.
But what happened was some people got dropped off here in the United States, and some people got dropped off in the West Indies. My forefathers happen to have been dropped off in Jamaica.
Sure.
Now, if that hadn't happened, we would all, be Ghanaian or Nigerian or whatever, and we would have a common culture.
Sure.
What has happened is that it was a divide and conquer type of situation where some went one place, some went the other place, and our histories then divided.
Sure.
And so we've had different experiences. So just think about it. If you're in a country where the majority of the people, literally the number of people, the majority look different from you, talk different from you, and not only that, not only do they look different and behave differently and talk differently, but they also think that they're better than you. and they treat you as if they're better than you. And the history has gone on longer than the people who were fortunate enough or blessed enough to get dropped in a place where we ended up outnumbering the oppressors. And so because we outnumbered them, it was and was able to outmaneuver them because of the terrain in which we were placed.
Sure.
So we were blessed. You know, we got a good hand, as they say. And so growing up as a child, I did not have the experience. I mean, I was in Jamaica for the first 10 years of my life before I left the first time. And I did not have the experience of being called names because of my color. I did not have the experience of having to live in a particular part of the country because of my color. I didn't know that. I didn't have that experience. And so that early developmental stage,
Sure.
that's what I internalized.
Sure.
And so I would have internalized a positive self-image. Now, that's not to say that I'm better than the person who internalized a negative self-image. I just had a different experience. And so what sometimes looks, honestly, I've had this talk with some people, what sometimes looks like pride is just the difference in our experience. Okay. And Jamaicans, because we ended up being the majority, and it is reflected in the society and in the positions that people hold and all that kind of thing, we've developed a natural kind of can-do spirit that sometimes can come across as being overbearing and as you're trying to take over. We're actually not consciously trying to take over anything. We're just kind of doing what comes naturally to us. Sure. But it doesn't look right because we all look alike. So therefore, the expectation is different. But what's internalized is what we have. We can't, it's what we have.
Sure. We had a similar experience here in the States. Prior to 1968, 1969, I was probably either sophomore or junior in high school. Prior to that, we were either Negroes or colored, but we never wanted to be called black, right? Mm-hmm. Those were fighting words, right? If a white dude called us black, they got punched in the face, right? That was not something we embraced because we did not embrace Africa. It's tragic.
Same thing.
It's tragic what white people have done to us to divorce us from our heritage. Mm-hmm. And in I think it was 1968, I probably was a sophomore. In fact, I was a sophomore. I see it now. James Brown comes out with the song, Say It Loud. I'm black
and I'm proud.
And I'm proud.
Yes.
The dashikis broke out.
Yes.
Everything. We embraced our black heritage and our black pride. All of a sudden, we were Black Americans. We were no longer colored. We were no longer Negroes. We were Black Americans for the very first time, and we're proud of it. It is amazing. It is amazing how art and music and musicians can affect the culture. Yes. Because we absolutely had the very same experience that you all did. And it is absolutely incredible. Now, I want to say this to everybody. I'm trying to give you some time because if you have some questions for Dr. Gordon, we want you to input your questions and write them in the chat. You're on our Facebook page. Just write them in on the chat. We will get them. Shalene will submit them to me and I will ask Dr. Gordon. And until we get some questions, I just have a couple of more that I will continue with. Okay. Let's see. I believe it was either 2000 at the General Conference in Toronto or 2005 at the General Conference in St. Louis that I looked at the statistics about the Adventist church in the various countries around the world, and I saw that Jamaica had one of the best per capita percentages of any, if not the best per capita percentage. Here's what I saw. For every 8 Jamaicans, there was a Seventh-day Adventist. At least that's what I think I saw, okay? So my question to you is, why is Seventh-day Adventist so attractive on the island? What are Jamaicans doing in Jamaica that we are not doing in the U.S. and the rest of the world? Why are you so effective on the island? I mean, because I understand there's a Jamaican church everywhere. You throw a stone, you're going to hit a Jamaican church. So what is it?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I'm not sure that I have the answer. I know that Jamaicans are fundamentally drawn to religion. Okay. Even, I mean, you can find what we call a bad man, you know, and they have certain respect for religious values. I mean, I was in a meeting just this past week with a group of academics in Jamaica, and before we started the meeting, they said, "Oh, Dr. Gordon, would you pray for us, please?" And they're not Adventists.
Got you.
And I don't even know what affiliation they have particularly, but it is a common practice. No matter what meeting it is that you're having in Jamaica, it's automatic. You pray to start.
Wow.
So I don't know if the missionaries did a better job in Jamaica. Okay. I really don't know, but it is ingrained in us. Or it could possibly have to do with our origin. But then I don't know that would speak to it exactly, because then we're not the only ones who came from West Africa.
Right.
So I really don't know the answer to that question, but it is definitely a fact that, and I think also possibly the fact that the island was under the British for a good long while, from 1655 until 1962, we were British. And the Jamaican church, not so much now, things are changing a lot, but originally the Jamaican church was was more conservative. It was very conservative. And so I think that perhaps the British way of thinking, along with the conservative way of worship, maybe they just agreed, you know, they were compatible. I don't know.
Well, let me say this. Here's my interpretation, and my wife does not like me, does not like to hear me say this. Here's my interpretation. It's my understanding that in Jamaica, a pastor can have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 churches.
Yes.
And he may visit a church once per month, or once every month and a half, because he's at a different church every month. Mm-hmm. That means that the duty and the responsibility of growing that church,
the elders,
falls to the local church, the elders, the leadership, and the members.
Definitely.
Literally, and you actually have in Jamaica members who build their own churches because they're doing the work.
Oh, yes.
Right?
That's very true. I mean, that is absolutely true. The church is owned by the members. And when I say owned by the members, I mean, they don't just come to church.
Right.
It's our church. It's us. We are the people, so to speak. You know. So I mean, that part is absolutely true. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, much of the work that's done in Jamaica is done by lay people, and there's not this strong distinction between the pastors. I mean, the pastors are very highly respected. That's not what I mean. But in terms of the work.
Yes.
We don't see it as, oh, well, that's what the pastor does. We all, the work belongs to all the people.
And unfortunately here in America, for some people, if the pastor hasn't visited you, you could be visited by 9 elders. But if the pastor hasn't visited you, you haven't been visited.
No, different mentality.
Yeah, it's a completely different mentality.
Yes.
So I'm sure that's one of the things. Look, we have some questions. We have some questions coming in. This is from Natasha. Auntie Bev, can you explain how we, and she had to inform us that she's from Jamaica, how we have the most churches per capita and still have so much violence?
No, that is something that I touched on, but I know that I didn't have enough time to really go into that, because that's something that troubles me a lot. And in some of the work with the Jamaican diaspora, we're actually addressing some of that issue, because I believe that in spite of having religion, not everybody has necessarily internalized the values and the values of Christianity to that extent. In addition to that, the social problems that exist also influence the way people live. That's why we can say that even a gunman in the worst ghetto in Jamaica has some respect for the Bible and for religious people.
Okay.
They might not have internalized it because of their social conditions, level of poverty, lack of resources, all of those things, but they still have that respect for religion. So we have a lot of churches, and we have a large number of people who are actually involved with the churches, but at the same time, the social ills are so strong that I think that the church needs to step up. We're stepping up in terms of outreach and getting things done in the church. We got to, and it's not to say it's not happening, because I know of things that are happening where the church is actually going into these areas and trying to make change. But sometimes the resources that are needed are not even available to the people from the church, if you understand what I mean. So we have an overall lack of resources in some areas, in some things. And so we might go in, you can't preach a sermon to somebody who's hungry, and or somebody who is sick, or somebody who lost a job and has no hope of getting a job again, and all the other various ills that exist there. So I believe that in spite of the number of churches, the internalizing of the values hasn't necessarily happened. And I also believe that a lot of the values that we used to hold dear have changed, because we refer to as a third world country, right? And so the general idea is that if you're a third world country, that means that these other countries are better than you are in some way. And so if you want to advance, you have to adopt some of these principles. And I think that just in visiting Jamaica in the last couple of years, I believe that we have become secularized to such a large extent that some of the values that were just natural to us, they're not there anymore. And so, whereas I remember as a child, we used to sleep with our windows open, and we weren't on an upper level or anything. It was the ground level. We slept with our windows open, and a child could walk down the street. The neighbors would be protective of the child. But now it's not that way anymore. And I think things like television increases the sense of a global world. And so what people see on television now becomes a kind of a reality to them. And of course, this reality is happening in places that are considered to be superior to where they are. And so, those folks are getting along fine, and they're regarded this way. So we adopt. I mean, I see it in things like, even Jamaica is a temperate climate, right? More tropical. And so we would wear clothing that's appropriate for that. I see some people wearing winter clothes, really. Why? Why are they doing that?
In Jamaica?
I've seen it, and others have seen it. It's not a widespread thing, but people do it. There are many European ways that have been adopted because it's considered to be superior. And I think that that has altered our value system. So those are some of the things that I believe contribute to the increase in crime.
Continuing on that theme, here in Chicago, now I don't have the specific statistics,
Mhm.
and I'm not a betting man, but if I had to put money on it, I'd bet that Chicago is the murder capital of the US, right?
I believe it's been called that.
Yeah. But there's obviously, where there is a lot of poverty,
Mhm.
there's going to be a lot of crime.
Yes.
Is poverty a factor? Is poverty a factor in Jamaica as to why it is now considered to be the murder capital of the world? I mean, for that to be associated with Jamaica, it just astounds me.
You mean poverty?
No. I believe I heard you say that Jamaica is now viewed as the murder capital of the world. Did I not hear you say that?
Yes, I was told that. I was told that just this past week. And we know that the crime rate is really high. It's very high. And that's one of the concerns right now for the government and for, well-thinking people. And it's not to say that crime is happening everywhere and, just rampant. Most of the crime that's occurring is occurring in areas where poverty is high and where resources are low. Yes. And so poverty is absolutely a factor. And the interesting thing is, just like the United States of America, where you have exorbitant wealth in some areas, and then you have abject poverty in other places, we have the same pattern. And so you have individuals who are billionaires and millionaires, not in Jamaican currency, but in American currency. We have billionaires and millionaires. But we also have people who don't have food to eat and who have, 6 people living in one room. Right. So there's that whole gamut. And most of the crime is happening in areas that are deprived. And it's also, most of the crime also is happening among younger people. So most of the crime is being committed by persons under age 30. And again, I think that points to the changes in values. And the whole secularizing of the society.
When the gay phenomenon exploded here in the United States, and started to become much more accepted in the US, I was told that in Jamaica, you better not come out of the closet because you will get hurt. Has you mentioned the secularization of Jamaica? Has that phenomenon changed on the island?
I don't believe it's changed significantly. Of course, there is some change depending on which part of the society you're looking at. So individuals who tend to live in the more urban areas and what we would refer to as the upper class, more educated, would be, better not say that. I better not make a generalization of that. But what I want to say is that it has changed to some extent, because there are groups, activist groups who are trying to influence the thinking in that regard. But as a general principle across the island in the general population, it really hasn't changed. And I want to tell you that even Jamaicans living here in the United States are likely to have a different perspective than the general population.
There's another question. Got you. There's another question. Natasha is asking, can you also expand on why Jamaicans don't place such strong emphasis on race? You may have touched on that already, but that's the question.
Okay. So really the whole concept of race was not something that was one of the reasons. Well, let me go back a little bit, because I did talk about this, but if you look at our history, race was not a factor outside of the slave industry. So it became a factor because the British brought the slave trade to Jamaica, and so it became a factor in that way. But we okay, so the African slave was mistreated, and then you had the Asian indentured servants, and you also had some Caucasian indentured servants as well, actually. But they were treated badly as well. So the issue kind of came about not so much in relation to race itself, because we never really talked about race in that way. It wasn't a matter of race, it was a matter of class, because it was a matter of who had the wealth and who didn't, who had the resources and who didn't. And it still is a matter of that, actually. So race wasn't the thing that divided us, class divided us. But as I mentioned, there is a loose kind of correlation between race and class, in the sense that because of the slavery and then the colonialism, because of those two periods of time, people came to think about white persons who were white and persons who were mulatto as being better than, because they had access to the resources. And persons coming out of slavery had a difficult time catching up, and really a lot haven't caught up, because they were obviously not paid as slaves. And then that 6-year apprenticeship, what a nice name to call it.
Right.
Apprenticeship, right? That 6 years apprenticeship that they were forced to do, well, they ended up only doing 4 because of the work of the Quakers and the Wilberforce, so it ended 2 years before. But that just perpetuated that whole system of, the plantation owner and the slaves.
Absolutely.
And so that's continued, but we've never really had a huge issue in terms of, because we're predominantly Black.
Sure.
We're predominantly Black, and the few the others, Indians, Chinese, other Asians, we just kind of we almost kind of had a common enemy. That's a strong word, but when we were under British rule,
Sure.
so we were Jamaicans together.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I've got one last question for you. You may need to go and get another doctorate, Doc. Just to answer this question. And here it is. I'm putting it on your tape. I'm putting it on your plate right here.
Okay.
Inquiring minds want to know. This inquiring mind wants to know, okay, what's the difference between rice and peas?
And peas and
rice.
Peas and rice. I do need another doctorate for that.
That question, Doc, I could answer.
You're not the expert here today, Angela. Dr. Beverley Gordon is the expert here today from the island of Jamaica.
I guess.
Well, in Jamaica, it's rice and peas, even though you cook the peas first, right?
Yeah.
But it's rice and peas. In other, I think my Trinidadian friends say peas and rice.
Right.
I'm Bahamian descent, and we say peas and rice also.
Who said?
I'm Bahamian descent.
Uh-huh.
And we say peas and rice also.
Okay, so I don't know. I'm gonna go get another doctorate to answer that one. I don't know. I think it's just the way the language emerged.
Awesome. Well, look, Doc, what a tremendous presentation. It truly has been a blessing just to have you here. I took copious notes, because on tomorrow at 1 p.m. we are going to upload every week. Mm-hmm. We have, and I still want a question from you. You can give it to Georgia P, whomever, okay? From your presentation that you can submit, because every week we ask a question and we put it on one of our platforms for the viewers to answer, and we provide them with a gift. Mm-hmm. So And we're going to do this until the end of the month. So the question will go up tomorrow at 1 p.m. And all of our viewers, whether you're members or not, you will have the opportunity of answering the question. You will have two hours. At 3 o'clock, we then make a decision as to who the winner was. Last week, Tessa Boyd was the winner. I believe a couple of weeks before then, Danielle won back-to-back weeks. So we're continuing on tomorrow with that question. So look for that question tomorrow, and we will have it up by 1 p.m. Now, next Sabbath, our focus is going to be on Brazil. We have a service all day long, morning and afternoon. Pastor Leonel Sousa will be coming to us from Brazil.
Oh, wow.
He was born in North Africa, but he's pastoring a church. I believe it was the first Black Brazilian Adventist church in Brazil, and he is the pastor of that church. He will be with us in the afternoon. A young lady by the name of Annalise, she is a member at the Capitol Hill Church in DC, will be our presenter. So we're going to talk about the history of Brazil, racism in Brazil, racism in the Adventist church in Brazil, as well as some Brazilian cuisine. And that's her thing. So we're going to have an awesome time. We're going to have an awesome time on next Sabbath. You do not want to miss next Sabbath morning and afternoon. And then the week after, we will conclude a month-long celebration with a focus on South Africa. John and Grace Zuzo from South Africa are leading out. They are the team that's leading out with that. We're going to have an awesome time. So I am truly excited. I want to thank again Dr. Beverley Gordon for being our guest presenter this afternoon. What an incredible presentation. The knowledge was first class. And I want to thank P and her entire team for the great job that they've done of pulling this weekend, this day together. All of the guests, all of the presenters, all of the participants,
All the music.
and the music, everything today was just was exquisite. It was absolutely exquisite. I think, with all of this information, I think I should be made an honorary Jamaican after today. So after
You're welcome, Pastor.
Am I welcome, Dr.?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have common origins.
All right. Awesome. Again, and I want to thank our media and communications team for all of the hard work that they do and they put in, making each Sabbath as successful as it is. I thank everybody for all of your contributions. So remember, next Sabbath morning at 10:15, our service begins, and we are going to shine the spotlight on our brothers and sisters from Brazil. So throughout the week, may God be with you. May he bless you, and may you have a good time. Let me have a closing prayer. Father God, I thank you for all that we've experienced, all that we have heard, what our ears have heard, what our hearts have felt, what our eyes have seen. Lord, we are one people, so continue to bless us, bring us together. And even if it doesn't happen here in the United States because of all that which is going on, Lord, we know we will experience oneness one day by and by in the kingdom above. Bless us, guide us, and keep us to this end. In Jesus' name we ask it. For his sake, we pray. Let the church say, amen.
Amen.
God bless everybody. Have a great week. Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
This is the land of my birth. I said, this is the